your kids, no matter how atypical they are, they can sense when something's off with you. They definitely respond to your emotions. And if you're just always depressed or, worried, and you're just showing that, they'll pick up on that.
This is Dadography, a podcast with stories and insights on fatherhood from dads around the globe, dedicated to providing you with the tools and tips to become a better dad. Once again, welcome to the Dadography podcast. I'm your host, Corey Ward, and today we have with us Mr. Damon Wiener from Atlanta, Georgia. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show and look forward to getting to know you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Corey. Good to see you or talk to you as well. Looking forward to sharing my story with you and your listeners.
All right, man. Well, let's jump right into it, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Damon.
Sure. So I was born in New York, but basically raised down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Then went to University of Florida for both undergrad and law school. And then after law school, moved up to Atlanta. I've pretty much been here since about December of 96, moved out to California for about a year, and then also moved back down to South Florida for about 2 years. But all in all, pretty much been in Atlanta for 20 plus years. Been married for about 20 years, met my wife here in Atlanta, and we've got 3 kids. We've got 2 boys that are 16 and 14. So that's 10th and 8th grade. And then a daughter that is 11 years old. She'll be 12 in May. And as we'll talk about, a little bit, she's got pretty significant special needs. So I don't really qualify what grade she's in, but just a joy to be around and all that good stuff. Currently, I'm general counsel for a company called Safeguard Products. When I'm not working or spending time with the family, then love going to concerts and movies and, just all fun stuff like that we haven't really been able to do for about at least a year now.
I'm totally looking forward to be able to take in a good concert again. There was a concert that was headed here to Panama on the 24th of March, and the lockdown happened here on the 16th of March. So I was pretty disappointed in that. So I'm definitely on your side in terms of just wanting to be able to take in a good concert again. Well, listen, man, tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up with your dad. Take me back in time and let me experience that with you. What was it like?
Sure. So I had what was probably back then a pretty traditional family, nuclear family. Mom that, she most of my life was a substitute teacher, but, really around the house a lot. And then my dad was kind of the strict disciplinarian. He was around a lot. He actually worked out of the house. So there were lots of times where it was quiet time because Dad was on a work call kind of thing. And it was definitely a strict upbringing. I was a good kid. So I really didn't get in trouble a lot, but a lot of that was, the fear of getting in trouble. I have a younger sister who was not as afraid of getting in trouble as I was. So I think a lot of the yelling I probably heard back then was probably a little bit more at her. I definitely had the fear in me not to fall out of line, not to talk back, things like that, which I did kind of feel kind of stifled my voice a little bit. We never know for sure what we would be like, if we changed one thing. There's all the butterfly effects and nothing's in a vacuum. But I definitely have always thought that, really my inability to kind of speak back or speak up for myself, especially with my parents, kind of led to me being probably a little bit meeker and non-confrontational, than I probably would want to be.
Right.
And I really did make a concerted effort to try to swing the pendulum in the other direction with my kids, to the point that I may have actually gone too far. My oldest son, who's 16 now, I really gave him a lot of latitude to kind of speak up, and it was fine for quite a while. But I think as he's gotten older and bigger, I think now he thinks we're on the same level. We had a come to Jesus conversation probably about 2 weeks ago where I think he finally acknowledged that he has been acting like he's on the same level as us, and he realizes that he's not. The easiest thing or punishment, punitive measure to take is okay, give me your phone. And, a lot of times you do that and it takes about 5 minutes till you finally get the phone, which is not the way it should be. I would say I used to probably fight back a lot more. But all that did was cause it to escalate. And, through talking with some counselors and therapists and things like that, they gave me advice that honestly went against everything that I thought I should be doing. So now I do walk away a little bit more often, but I was very happy that, even though it took a big blowout to get there, we definitely had a good conversation and hoping that we've turned the corner. But, it just goes to show, there's no perfect way to do it. I could be critical of how strict my dad was, and I can be critical right now of how lenient I was. And I just didn't know where the right spot was. That's Evan, my oldest. He's 16. And then I have another son, Joshua, that's 14. And with him, I was definitely more strict. Not anywhere, I think, as close to, what I remember or feel my dad was to me, but definitely not as lenient as I was with Evan. But there were things that are just different about them just innately. I mean, Evan's an extrovert and a fly by the seat of his pants kind of guy. Joshua is a little bit more of an introvert, but I definitely do see a difference. And I do think that at least some of that is directly related to how I treated them. And I don't really know what it was that made me treat them differently, because it wasn't like, there are 20 months age difference between the two. So it's not like Evan was, 12 and starting to act up and all of a sudden I switched things with Joshua. So I don't know if it was just one of those things like my firstborn, I kind of put on a pedestal and treated with kid gloves, whereas, Joshua was like, okay, I got this. I know how I want to be. I'm already tired. It's not new to me anymore. So right. I definitely there's some impatience in me that I think I probably picked that up from my dad. That, that's one of those things where, I try to work on it. With everything going on, whether it's with the kids or the wife or the job or just life in general, I'm certainly not the only one, but, there's just a lot of things coming at you. And I, when you're a kid, you never really think about, oh, did my dad have a bad day today? Did he get chewed out by the boss? And, is that why he's in a bad mood, or, whatever the reason could be? You just don't think about the things that happen outside. And whereas as an adult, you come home from just a rough day at work or whatever it is that was just a rough day that you had to deal with. And, while you're excited to, be home with the family, you don't want to deal with drama at that point. And it's just, at least for me, unfortunately, much easier to lose my patience than to kind of sit there and go, okay, breathe in, breathe out. Remember, they don't know anything would happen. And, there's plenty of nights, you go to bed and you go, okay, what were the things I did wrong today?
Yeah.
and what were the things I did right? And you just always hope that the things that were right outweigh the things that were wrong.
Yeah.
But
well, it sounds like, definitely your father had an impact on you. We had a show recently, and I'm paraphrasing the guest. He said, whether you had a terrible father or you had an excellent father, you had the blueprint for either what not to be or what to be. So it sounds like you took some things away from your dad and made some adjustments. What's probably one of the most memorable moments? I know he was an authoritative figure, but what's a memorable moment with your dad from your childhood?
I played baseball, all growing up and through high school. I'm a average size Jewish guy, not born with a ton of, amazing athletic ability, kind of stuff like that. So I probably don't have the type of work ethic just in me, at least back then, to have done it on my own, to put in the time that I needed to, at a minimum, catch up to some of the other kids my age.
Right.
And while I probably didn't love it as much at the time, because I'd rather be out goofing around with my friends. My dad really was, my coach growing up, and he would read up on things during the day, pitching techniques and rehab techniques with your arm and all that kind of stuff. And I, come home from school, and most of the days, if I didn't have my school practice, we're outside I'm pitching to him, he's catching, or I got a neighbor to come over to help out, and just probably all the time that he put into working with me to make me better, and honestly to make me do things that I probably would not have done myself. And as I said, a minute ago, I was probably bitching about it in my mind at the time, but certainly looking back at it, I know, not only was it good intentioned, but it helped, it worked, and it provided us with a lot of time to kind of spend together, which, back then I probably thought was a mixed bag as well. It's probably like, oh God, I got to hang out with my dad again. But, I would say that was probably the thing that he was probably the most involved in with me. And, the only other thing that I'll throw out there, as I said, I'm Jewish. So when I turned 13, I had a bar mitzvah. And I remember at the very end of the night, during the day, we had the ceremony and then we had the reception at night. And I remember at the very end, we're on video, I'm thanking them, my parents, for the night, and they're telling me how proud they are. And just, the waterworks opening up. And I'm not saying that I never saw my dad have emotion, because I definitely did, but I don't know, that's just something that did always kind of stick with me as kind of a really nice moment.
Yeah, it sounds very special. Along the same lines, the fact that he spent time with you, helping you in terms of pitching, that's significant. One of the things that I've heard reoccurring on the show is the importance of dads spending time with their kids. And a lot of times we tend to think in terms of time like Disney World or, the big, European vacation or whatever the case may be. But what I've seen over and over again is, oh, well, we used to pitch together, or, him crying in this case, at my bar mitzvah. So it definitely, those things are significant. And I appreciate you sharing that, man. That's definitely something to encourage the dads out there, to kind of help them a little bit more, to be more involved. And spending time with their kids. Do you see any similarities in terms of the way you father and the way that your father fathered you, or is it mostly differences?
I guess there's probably some of each. Even though I say that I'm laid back and was more lenient, I mean, there were still plenty of times where, I kind of ruled with an iron fist, if it had gotten too far. And, certainly times that I probably was stricter than I would have wanted to be, and impatient, which kind of made me think, of him a little bit.
Right.
He was around a lot. It definitely was not a situation where I had an absentee dad. He was, involved in a lot of things, or, attending a lot of things that I would participate in. And I would say that's definitely something that I am emulating there. Even before the pandemic, and we were quarantining, I didn't work too far from the house, and my hours, I'd probably be home by 7 most days, and which was maybe a little bit later than I would want, but when I got home, it was straight into kind of dad mode until everyone went to bed. So I'd say kind of the amount of time that of being present, and not just present, being involved, because it's not just that they can look over and see that you're there. It's that you're participating or giving them something and contributing to whatever it is that they're doing as best as you can.
Yeah, I remember reading a while back. I'm not sure if it was C.S. Lewis or some other author, but talked about how his dad would sit down and go over comic books with him. And he said that he really realized that his dad had absolutely no interest in comic books, but the fact that he was doing it really expressed to him his love, or the love that his dad had for him. And in my case, it's definitely an area of weakness, because work can be all consuming sometimes. And I'll get home. I actually get home a little bit earlier than you. I get home around 6:30. And if I'm exhausted, of course I speak and we'll have dinner, and I'm just, and my daughter's at an age, she really loves anime. So okay. I've been trying to get into that lately, or at least for her sake, to get that quality time. I think it's wise to try to get in the quality time when you can, and show interest in the things that interest them, man, for sure.
Yeah, I remember a few nights, and this is years ago at this point, where I'd come home and it was bedtime, and the boys wanted me to lay down with them, read them a book, all this kind of stuff, and I remember just being exhausted and going, oh, all I want to do is just go plop down on the couch and chill out. And I would remind myself, you know what, in a couple of years, they're not going to want to do this with you. It happens to all of us. I'm like, I remember, loving to spend time with my dad. And then I remember becoming an individual or a teenager that had, my own things, and that wasn't cool anymore.
Right.
And I was just like, enjoy it and embrace it as much as you can now, because it's not going to last forever. And sure enough, I've got the 2 teenage boys now. They're just in their room playing their video games or whatnot. So
exactly,
definitely take advantage of it while you can.
Well, tell me this: how would you encapsulate your fatherhood style?
I would probably say trying to be their buddy, which I realize is not always the best way to approach it. I really, I mentioned before some of the things I went out of my way to do. And one of the things was that I was looking at it like when they grow up, I want them to look at me as a confidant, as someone that they go, God, my dad's awesome. I love him. I respect what he has to say. He helps me out. He's there for me. Then that's one of those things that you got to be cautious about doing that, because it does lead to a blending of the roles between you and your son. And, as I was saying before, that definitely happened with my oldest. And now here I am going, wow, all those years I was trying to be his buddy, and we were buddy. And then, he's developed some bad habits because of that. And we're not buddy now. It wasn't just supposed to be, fun for a couple of years. It was supposed to be something that, lasts forever. And certainly I believe that it will. I think this is a phase that, they go through as they get older, and certainly hope that we get to the point where, they look at me and go, wow, that's my dad. I'm so proud of him. And, I love having him as my dad.
Well, Damon, let's change gears a little bit. You mentioned earlier you have an 11-year-old daughter. You touched on the fact that, she has some pretty significant special needs. Did you find out that your daughter would have special needs before or after her birth?
No, it was after her birth. And honestly, it wasn't even until 6 to 9 months after she was born. Alexandra, so my wife is Kim, my daughter's Alexandra. Mm-hmm. Her nickname's Beady. We call it Beady Bopper Boo. And so my wife had what, by all accounts, was a normal pregnancy, carried her to term. When she was born, she was definitely a little bit smaller than we were expecting, but it wasn't like preemie size or immature or anything like that.
Okay.
And I would say, over, I guess, the first 6 months, we started realizing that, she wasn't doing a lot of the things that kids her age would be doing, rolling over or sitting up or, those kind of movement types of things. Really, we had no idea what was going on. We weren't even sure if something was going on. It was she just delayed, because none of the sonograms or anything that was done during pregnancy indicated that there was anything off. We ended up, taking her to a couple people here and didn't in Atlanta, a couple doctors, and didn't really get as many answers as we wanted up front. We ended up going to doctors in Chicago. I think it was at the University of Chicago. And then up in Boston, I think it was the Children's Hospital that they have there. And we went up to both of those after we had a diagnosis that she had two conditions. One is microcephaly, which people probably became more familiar with when the whole Zika virus was going on, however many years ago that was. And microcephaly is just basically small head. So she has a smaller head, which in turn means smaller brain. Fortunately for her, when they do the MRI, it looks like a normal brain that's just smaller. Then the other diagnosis that we got for her was cerebellar hypoplasia, which the cerebellum is the little mushroom-shaped part of your brain, and the back bottom part of your brain, and hers didn't fully form. So basically, if you imagine it as a mushroom, she doesn't have the stem of the mushroom there, and that affects kind of cadence and mobility and a lot of different things. So she, when you see her in pictures, I bet there's a lot of people that may not even realize that she has, such significant special needs. Some of it is she's just always happy, always smiling, always in a good mood. But she's she's becoming more verbal over, I would say, the last probably 2 years. And, there's things that my wife and I understand that she's saying that you would have no idea what she was talking about, but she's making major improvements each day. But there's still, there's very little that she can really do on her own. And that's a challenge. We unfortunately, both my daughter and I actually tested positive for COVID. It was at the very beginning of January. And, that was one of our biggest fears was, how would it affect her? And if she got it, well, she wasn't going to be able to quarantine on her own. Whereas if it was one of the boys, we'd say, hey, just stay in your room. We'll bring you your food, do whatever.
Right.
So for her, whether I had it or not, one of us was going to be down there in the basement with her quarantining. And it was just, it's always a lot, that we have to do with her. Very, very rewarding. And it's great, but it's just a lot, and it's challenging, even with the boys in the house.
Right.
Because even though I think, they get that she has special needs, to them, she's their sister. And well, why is she getting special treatment? Why does she get, why don't you get mad at her for doing this? And it's, some of that's immaturity. Actually, a lot of it's immaturity, but some of it, I almost like to think it's just familiarity with her. When they see other kids with special needs, because we're involved in a lot of organizations that kind of cater to the special needs community, and they're at those events and they're helping out with the other kids and being really sympathetic. And my wife and I just look at each other, and go, how can they be so nice to them and not to Alexandra? And it's like, they're brothers and sisters.
Corey here, wanting to give you a personal invitation to follow us on Instagram. You can find us at Dadography Podcast. It's really good because you get an opportunity to put a face with the voice that gave you some insight or some encouragement on your journey in fatherhood. We look forward to having you follow us on Instagram at Dadography Podcast.
Yeah, and maybe through their eyes, they're just like, yeah, she's just my sister, like you said. So let me back up just a little bit, though. As you were speaking, I was trying to imagine just the emotional journey. So she's 11. So you guys have already had 2 boys at this time, married for 20 years. So as you get this news and you guys are going from state to state, trying to get to the bottom of what may be the issue, you've got to continue fathering your boys. You've got to sustain your wife emotionally. And then on top of that, you've got to deal with your own emotions as well, which I can't imagine what those emotions were like. How did you manage all of that?
Yeah, it definitely is a lot. And I don't mean to suggest at all right now that I'm some big Superman that could handle it all, but I really just looked at it like this is the hand we're dealt. And we just kind of got to plow through it and make the best of it. I would say there was kind of a divide and conquer attitude in our house where it really was my wife that was, extremely involved in everything with Alexandra. And then I don't want to say the primary caretaker of the boys, because I don't mean to minimize. She did plenty with them, but it really was a lot of, okay, I'm going to handle the boys and you're with Alexandra. So that helped a little bit. And my wife is definitely more emotional than I am about these types of things. She carries it a lot more than I do. I have an ability to be pretty optimistic and, definitely try to see the bright side in everything. And, like I said before, it kind of is what it is. I don't know what we would really do differently, but this was the path that we're led on, and you just got to find a way to deal with it. What made it even harder for us is that even though we knew what 2 of her symptoms are, it's a genetic disorder. And, we actually fairly recently found out that it has to do with the Cas gene and blah, blah, blah. I don't even understand all the science behind it, but that doesn't even matter at this point because, these types of genetic disorders, even though they're not uncommon, it's not like some of the more common, special needs symptoms or conditions that people will have where you kind of know, okay, Down syndrome, this is pretty much what you have to expect. CP, this is what, with us, we didn't know. And, I mentioned before we went to those two different doctors, and it could not have been night and day between what they told us. And this is back when we didn't know what was going on. I mean, we knew she had microcephaly. We knew she had cerebellar hypoplasia. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know, okay, is this something that, is there an earlier rate of mortality? Is this something that she's never going to talk? She's never going to walk the right way? We had no idea. And when we went to the doctor in Chicago, and he painted a rather bleak picture to us of what we could expect. Now he acknowledged there's a wide spectrum here. He's like, I've seen some kids that have these symptoms or conditions, that go to college, at a more of a rudimentary level. I've seen some of them that have a job, bagging groceries or things like that. And then they said, I have seen some that are immobile and, can't communicate. He said, so it's just this big spectrum. And I know he was just trying to be kind of a realist and not, kind of set us up for, a big come down, letting us think that, wow, things are going to be all rosy for us. And then they're not. But I remember leaving there, and my wife, I think was just devastated by what he had to say. But then we went to see these doctors in Boston that, they walked into the room and they said to us, Alexander was on the table giggling, and they said, wow, this is not what we were expecting to see when we walked in here after reading her file. They said, we were expecting, someone in much worse shape. And, they said just the fact how much she was interacting with them, how social she was. And once again, this is probably still under a year old. Mm-hmm. They said, this is a great thing to see. And it was great that we ended on that note, that they were the second ones we went to see. And quite frankly, my wife has a level of dedication and determination in her that honestly I don't normally have. I'd like to think that if God forbid something happened to her and it was all on me, that I would find a way to dig down deep and do all the things that she did. But while she's here, I was happy to have her focus on those things, all the exercises and the therapy. Not only it's easy to take them to the therapy and have the therapist work with them. It's all the other stuff you have to do once you're back at home and continue doing those types of things.
Sounds like your wife is your hero there, Damon.
Definitely when it comes to this.
Man.
She has a fire and determination in her that I definitely don't have. But we are kind of the yin to each other's yang. So it was challenging, not knowing what this meant. I mean, I remember asking questions like, okay, so does this mean she's going to die before she's 20? Does this mean, she's never going to be able to do this, that, or the other? And, what they basically told us, everything that we would ask, we don't know. With genetic disorders like this, they did say, we don't believe it has a major effect on their mortality, but you never know. And then there's just a lot of things, that I get concerned about her. I mean, she can't take care of herself, so I get nervous. Just what happens if she just falls the wrong way? She can run quite a bit now. I mean, she's very mobile. It's very awkward when you see her kind of running. And, I watch her do this and I'm like, how the heck is she not falling? I mean, you would see her and you think every time she's running, she's going to fall. And I'm like, God, that's all it takes. I mean, you hear about the elderly that unfortunately a lot of times, they fell in the shower or they broke their hip. And then all of a sudden something drastic happens because of infections or whatever. And I get nervous about even just stuff like that. If she falls, is she going to be able to know to put her hands up to kind of block or
right.
cushion her landing? So it's little things like that. And then there's just worrying about, what happens as we get older, because we do figure or are assuming she's going to live with us forever or for as long as we're able to. But, in some of the groups in our kind of special needs community, mm-hmm. We talked through that and we realized that we're both, my wife and I are almost 52, and that's not old. I mean, I can still do just about everything, but things start to ache and creak a little bit more when you're bending down, getting her ready and, getting her dressed or giving her a bath and, things like that, at some point, I don't know how far away into the future this is, but at some point it's going to be very difficult for the two of us to really do that. So it's like, okay, what kind of help are we going to have? Or is there going to be some sort of a home that we would be happy with and comfortable with putting her in to be able to do that? So, I mean, there's a lot of things to worry about. We sit here, we reinforce with our boys, hey, when your mom and I are gone, you need to be there for your sister. You need to take care of her. And they acknowledge it. It's funny, even Joshua, who is the one that probably gives her the least attention now. And I think my wife said something to him, asked him the other day, now, if you're so mean to her now, how are you going to be able to take care of her, and help her out when we're gone? He's like, well, of course. He goes, I'll be an adult then. I'll be able to do that kind of stuff then, but I'm a kid now. So we're like, okay, good. It's challenging. And unfortunately, it's a lot of the little things that make it challenging. I expect to have some problems with my sons, as they become teenagers and dealing with those teenage issues. But with my daughter, I mean, we're still dealing with infancy issues. It's like, wow, I thought 12 years after my last child's born on a Sunday, if I want to just sit on the couch and watch TV all day long, I don't have to worry that, oh, someone needs to watch one of the kids at this moment and having to trade off with my wife. I remember my dad, we 2 kids, both typical kids, no special needs. And, if when we were teenagers or young teens, we were doing our own thing, and my parents, I said my dad was, my mom also, they've got their free time, and we find ways to get some free time, whether it's swapping responsibilities or we have some people that come to help us. There's a lot of great groups out there that we've come to learn about and become involved in that are just there to help people, families with kids with special needs. So we have, there's a girl that comes over, she's a senior in high school right now, comes over every Sunday. She spends anywhere from, I'd say, 2 to 6 hours just kind of hanging out. And most of the time it's the 5 to 6 hours. She'll come over, play with Alexandra, which is nice for us. We're like, okay, we can go for a walk today without pushing the big stroller. We can go just chill out for a little bit. And then there's sports leagues that we participate in with her. There's a great soccer league, Top Hat Soccer, that we do. NYO, a local organization, has a Christopher's League, baseball league for kids with special needs. I get to do the announcing for that. So I get the kids or the parents to give me some information about the kids. And it's one of those things. I mean, I'm a sentimental guy. I'm a crier when I watch movies or, and all that stuff. And just sometimes I'm up there, announcing in the booth, and, a kid comes up to hit, and you just see how much it means to them at that moment. I'm reading off, Colin's up, he loves, watching Ninjago and, loves this song. And we play his music, and he's up there kind of wiggling his butt and dancing. And I just look at that, it just makes you so happy. And, tears start to well up a little bit. So we're fortunate, I would say, not only that we're in a financial position that we're able to help her out, almost as much as we possibly can, which I know there's a lot of people that don't have that sort of access, but we've also found these organizations and communities that are there to help also. And sometimes it's helping out, to give me free time. Sometimes it's like a shoulder to cry on kind of thing, or just someone to talk to that is going through something similar. So
yeah. It definitely, there were the emotional challenges, there were and are the physical challenges. What about internal battles? I mean, have you ever, as a father, had to battle with guilt, or I think you mentioned frustration a little bit, maybe like, oh, well, did this have something to do with me, or, that type of thing?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I would say the things that I say, does it have more to do with me? Probably have a little bit more to do with the boys.
Okay.
because they have a lot more learned behavior. Alexander certainly learns and picks up on social cues and things like that, but I don't know how much of how I've parented her, or times where I would say, wow, I slipped and I should have been more patient or should have done something differently. I've never really felt that had a major effect on her. But, there are definitely times, as I said before, where you lay there in bed and you think of the things you did right and the things you did wrong that day. With her, honestly, the most that I would say that I do wrong or I've done wrong is just, getting impatient. But there's also times where I look at it like, you know what, she may have special needs. She still knows and understands a lot of what she's doing. Mm-hmm. And she has to be held accountable for things. And I say that it sounds a lot more heavy-handed than I mean it to sound with her. When I think about the boys that they need to be held accountable for something, I'm thinking punishments or, true accountability like that. Whereas with my daughter, I understand that there's that wiggle room that I have to give her. Mm-hmm. But I also know, hey, she knows when I tell her to get up and do something, but she knows that when she doesn't do it, that she's not doing what I asked her to do.
Right.
And sometimes maybe she's just playing a game and she thinks it's funny. Other times I think she's just being kind of a little petulant child that's, doing her own thing.
Yeah.
And then there were some of those times where I probably react worse than I would probably want people to see me. But it's very easy to quickly snap back, or snap out of it with her.
Right.
Where could be upset and then I just get the giggle from her and boom, it's, daddy's heart is melted and, things are fairly back to normal.
Do you think that there's ever any spillover between the way you treat her and the way you treat the boys, or vice versa?
There probably is some. I know Joshua, my middle, would probably say that he doesn't think that there is, because he always says it's not fair. Like, we'll tell him he's being loud at dinner or something, and he'll go, well, Beatty's screaming. Why don't you tell her to stop? And it's like, well, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. So he would like for it to be exactly the same for all of them.
Right.
But it's certainly not the case. So I honestly, the way we raise her, it's just fundamentally different. With the boys, I would say we're trying to give them guidance. Mm-hmm. With her, we're just helping her physically do things a lot of the times.
Okay.
So it's just a different set of problems or circumstances that we're dealing with.
Well, if you could give any advice, words of encouragement, warning to a dad who is about to have a special needs child or has a special needs child, what encouragement or advice would you give to that father?
So I think I have to give the caveat that, there's such a wide spectrum of special needs or conditions. So, I mean, I'm fortunate right now that even though Alexandra's are pretty significant, she's still very mobile, interactive, and things like that. You've got to find the silver lining in everything and never lose that optimism. The way I always look at it is it could be worse. So I would just say, definitely don't lose hope. There's a fantastic poem or piece of literature. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it equates having a special needs kid to this trip that you had always dreamed of going on. And I'm sure I'm going to get it wrong, and it's very long, so I won't go through it. But the gist is, I had planned on going to Italy. I wanted to see the Colosseum. I wanted to see, the gondolas in Venice and all that kind of stuff. Well, I didn't get to go there, but here's what I did get to do. I got to go to this national park, near me instead. I got to do these other, and the whole symbolism is what your expectations are of what you're going to do, what the reality is, and the fact that you get, same positive emotions out of doing either of them. So it's something like I think the gist is, or the final part is, it's not the trip that I thought I was going to go on, but it's a wonderful trip nonetheless, or, it's the best trip I could go on, or something like that. And I'm sure I did not do it justice there. But it really, everybody has things that they have to deal with. It's very rare that someone's got the absolute perfect life. And whether it's your own personal demons that you're dealing with, whether it's disabilities that family members have, whether it's just your job you don't like. I mean, everybody has something that they deal with. And my view on that and kind of the way that I like to kind of face those things is, it is what it is. I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to have, her here. I'm happy to have my family around me. I'm happy to have all the things that I have, and just kind of make the best of all of it, and utilize those resources that are around you. It's almost a shame that it's really the more affluent people that know what is out there, whether it's, government aid, or it's just these private organizations that are there to help people out. And once again, whether it's special needs or a million other things that you're dealing with,
right?
It's the impoverished generally don't know that this is available to them. And plus the government bureaucracy makes it more difficult than it needs to be to get the type of aid that you want. But I would say to people, look into those organizations and the government aid that's out there, because it really does help a lot, both from, like I said before, the physical aspect of it, but definitely the emotional aspect, which I think is really the important part.
Right.
Because, your kids, no matter how atypical they are, they can sense when something's off with you. They definitely respond to your emotions. And if you're just always depressed or, worried, and you're just showing that, I mean, they'll pick up on that. And I definitely like to think that a lot of the progress that my daughter has made has a lot to do with the environment that we have in this house. I mean, not only, and definitely not taking anything away from what I said before about how much my wife pushed her and helped her do her things. I mean, we just live in a loud, crazy house where,
right.
There's always people here, the dog's barking, there's just always stuff going on. And I do think it's a pretty happy environment. And I think she just plays on. I mean, she sucks that up, and it turns it into her energy.
I wonder with the sibling rivalries, if that's had like a really positive effect in that, they'll see other special needs kids as special needs kids, but with her, they don't see her necessarily as a special needs kid. And so, that probably has a huge positive impact on her.
I would not be surprised. That actually does make sense. So.
Yeah. Well, Damon, I tell you what, man, I'm extremely grateful for you carving out some time to spend with us today. Definitely got a lot to contemplate. One of the things that really beams from your personality is just gratitude. A couple of times over the course of the conversation, you mentioned how, hey, it could be worse. And so I appreciate you being transparent. As you have been, and just sharing your gratitude. And that's one of the things that I would encourage dads to take away from this conversation is be grateful, to quote Damon, with the cards that you're dealt, and to put your best foot forward. And Damon, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and just talking and allowing us to have an insight on what it is to father a special needs child. I'm inclined to believe that special needs children are born to special dads. And this is definitely a case where that is true, man, for sure.
Well, thank you. I appreciate those words. And it was great talking to you too.
Likewise, man. Thank you very much.
Once again, we are reminded of making sure we spend quality time with our kids. Next thing you know, they are teenagers and you may or may not be that huge part in their agenda anymore. Damon and his wife came up with a strategy to delegate parenting tasks to make sure their special needs daughter gets the care and attention she needs, while not ignoring the needs of her older brothers. He recommends that you research and reach out to support groups, communities, and government organizations that provide support to families of special needs kids. Love conquers all, but it's important to know that you're not in this alone. Thank you, Damon. It was a great conversation. See you guys next week.